Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we are speaking about parenting multiples, right? So what to do when you're parenting a highly sensitive child and you feel like your other children, who may or may not be highly sensitive, but the highly sensitive child who is stuck in the meltdown cycle, daily, every other day meltdowns, and what to do when you feel like you're neglecting your other kids or your other kids are getting the scraps, if you will, of you. And so today we're going to talk all about the biggest thing that is getting in your way in feeling fulfilled in parenting your children and feeling like you are parenting all of your children in a way that gives each of them exactly what they need. And so when we speak about one of the things related to parenting multiple children, when you're stuck in the meltdown cycle, it's really important to understand why you're stuck in that pattern, because it impacts how your children relate to each other, right? So when oftentimes we speak with parents who are stuck in the cycle of dealing with meltdowns day in and day out. This is your child is going from 0 to 60. You don't know where or when they're going to melt down. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells, or you feel like your child is dropping, flipping out at the drop of a hat. They might be hitting or kicking or screaming or running away or engaging in, body flopped on the floor, screaming in that respect. And so when that's happening on a daily basis, it's draining, obviously, right? And it's draining on the whole family. One thing that many parents worry about, we hear this over and over again, is how it impacts siblings. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today is related to my own personal experience as well as my professional expertise. So many of you know that my sister's highly sensitive, and I grew up in a household where my parents didn't know what to do to break out of that meltdown cycle. And then I became a child therapist, and through my training, one can call it fate, one can call it destiny, learned exactly what to do to help parents out of this cycle, and now work with parents in that respect. And so knowing what it's like to be a sibling of a highly sensitive child who's dealing day in and day out with these big emotions and not knowing what to do, I want to speak about my experience today, but also look at it from the lens of science and having helped hundreds of families at this point, and what really is keeping you stuck. So one of the biggest barriers that many parents will say is that they feel like they're giving their all of your energy, right? All of your energy to your highly sensitive child, and feeling like your other children or child, depending on how many kids you have in the household, are not getting all of your attention because your sensitive kid is having these major meltdowns that can literally just be a factor of time, right? If you're spending an hour at a day dealing with a meltdown and you only have 2-3 hours to get kids from, sports to, or out of school to homework to sports to mealtime to bath time to bedtime, then the routine is significantly impacted when an hour of that, out of the 3-4 hours max you have, is siphoned by the meltdowns. So clearly there's a time issue that's impacting your ability to be in more than one place at once and to serve all of your children and to support them all at one time. But it's also important to notice that there's an emotional component to that, right? That for you, even if you do have an hour for each child, and one is dealt with a meltdown for your sensitive kid, and the other couple of hours are available for you to tag team with either a co-parent or a spouse or a grandparent or a caregiver, there's an important understanding that it's not just about time, right? It's also about your emotional energy and what is left when you're parenting in what we call survival mode. So when your child is stuck in this day-to-day meltdown, many of you it can make you want to look at the day-to-day experience as just that. Okay, we're dealing with a meltdown today. Here's what's the problem my kid's upset about today, and then let's try to find a solution to today's frustration, today's meltdown, today's aggravation, today's big emotion. And this can create two different problems, right? One, your brain as a parent is just moving a mile a minute and you have no idea why your kid is freaking out, because either A, it's a simple issue like brushing their teeth and they know they're supposed to do it every day and it's not news, or B, you don't understand why they're frustrated when they're trying to do something that they enjoy doing, or something that might be a more neutral experience. So not necessarily you're asking them to do something that they don't want to do, but maybe they were playing and they messed up in their own perspective of how things should go, and now they're disappointed and they just can't do anything else, right? So when you're parenting in this cycle and you're trying to support your child in dealing with the problem, you can really get stuck in a position of feeling like you're constantly putting out fires. And so when you're in that experience, it's a whack-a-mole experience, right? So parenting one highly sensitive child who struggles with bedtime routine, first you're focusing on how to get your kid to follow through on doing teeth brushing. Then you get them to do that regularly. Then all of a sudden they have an issue with putting on their pajamas. Then all of a sudden they have an issue with getting off the screens before bedtime to begin with. And when you work on the matter at hand, the problem in front of you right there and then that week, and you're supporting your child in solving that particular problem and helping them adjust to the fact that brushing teeth is a fact of life, then you're missing something, because you're treating that experience like a fire and you're just putting that particular fire out. So what does that do? It doesn't recognize, that approach doesn't recognize that you are the water. Now, when you're using yourself as the hose and you're dousing water on that fire, your emotional energy runs out, right? And so if your other highly sensitive or non-highly sensitive child has an issue or a concern or a worry, or they just need help or they want to talk to you and share with you about their day, you're fried, you're spent in that moment. And so when you're treating the meltdowns as a problem that has a direct, only singular solution, it can keep you stuck and it can keep you frustrated. And so it's important to notice that cycle means that as a parent, you end up not having enough energy or juice or water, if you will, to parent your other children. And so that feeds guilt. Okay, and what does guilt do? Guilt is an anchor. Guilt is an anchor that keeps you stuck. And so when you start parenting from guilt, this impacts your highly sensitive child too. So when we speak to parents and parents that we work with who are parenting from a place of feeling guilty, they end up treating their child and the issues that their child is dealing with from a place of principles. And there's a fear response to this. So if you're frustrated with your highly sensitive child, and then you're guilty that their needs are taking over the time that you can allot to your non-highly sensitive child, then you end up parenting your highly sensitive child from principle rather than intuition. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is when your sensitive child needs more time from you, or your sensitive child is legitimately fearful or legitimately having a hard time, you end up struggling to balance your ability to read the situation and read your child's needs with the fact that you have other children whose needs are not being met at that point. So what happens? It leads you to go straight for the jugular in parenting, right? And you don't like it. So what do I mean by that? It means you got to brush your teeth now. We don't have time. Your brother needs me. I can't deal with this, right? And so you end up doing this with either child. You can respond to your highly sensitive child like this, where it's, you end up in a pattern of my way or the highway, which you don't want to do. Maybe you were parented like that and you felt how crappy it was. Or you end up parenting your non-highly sensitive child like that because you literally have no more energy. And so as much as we know that there is no judgment in this pattern, it's super crucial for you to get clear on why you're stuck in it so that you can break out of it, right? So as a parent, when this happens, it breeds more guilt. It fosters more fear. And so when you're parenting your sensitive child and you're stuck in this pattern of just trying to solve the problem at hand, this is a approach that is often led by asking for tips and tricks. How do I get my kid to do this particular thing that is hard for them right now? And when you're doing that, you're not parenting them from principles, from a place of intuition. You're parenting them from principles from a place of how people should behave. And those kinds of principles are completely different than the types of principles that we teach here at MTC. But in terms of what you know your child needs to learn, the principles of values like kindness, care, compassion, empathy. And highly sensitive children have a skill set of developing those attributes of being kind, caring, compassionate, and empathetic when they're not overstimulated, when they can regulate their emotions, and when they're not regularly emotionally reactive. And so what happens is when you're in the moment trying to get your kid to do the thing you want them to do, you're stuck in the same situation that they are, which is that they're not getting what they want when they want it. And that perpetuates an emotional experience for you as a parent and an interpretation that your child is manipulating you. And as a result, you have literally no more energy for your other children. And when that happens, your other children start to feel undervalued and they don't know how to break out of this. So they start to develop patterns of behavior of their own. Now, I'm going to speak about that in terms of my own personal experience and what we see in different patterns for parents of highly sensitive kids with multiple kids. But first and foremost, I really want to speak further about this because when you're focusing on intuition, how do I help my child learn how to be kind, learn how to respond with empathy? Oftentimes we see parents try to teach this through lecturing, try to teach this by explaining how, when you had a meltdown and you were screaming and yelling and kicking and slamming the door, I wasn't able to help your sister and she was sad about that. That lesson that you're trying to teach your child, the intention is appropriate. You want your child to learn, to understand that their actions impact other people. But the problem with the approach is that highly sensitive children already know that their actions impact other people. They just don't know how to act on that knowing, that intuitive knowing, because they're stuck in fear. And so when we think about getting your child out of that fear, it is super important to understand for you that parenting from intuition is fostered through strategy. So what do I mean by that? You need to be able to give your child consistent feedback about their behavior without having it be part of a lecture of how it impacts other people. So when I think about what it was like growing up, being parented alongside my highly sensitive sister, one thing that I know was really difficult for my mom was to feel like she knew how to support all of us at once. Now, she had 3 kids. She still has 3 kids. And I was the oldest, my sister, the middle, and I have a brother who's the youngest. And the needs of our highly sensitive sister were so great that it was difficult for me to experience emotion and feel cared for unless that emotion was happiness or accomplishment. And so the challenge at that was that my mom was just fried. She was fried and didn't know how to break out of the pattern. So as much as we talk about what it was like for her and being in this situation, raising children, the hardest part, I think, for her was not knowing how to teach her daughter the lessons that she needed to learn in a way that felt not only systematic, but also not repetitive and draining. Because when you have a highly sensitive child who is constantly overwhelmed by their big emotions and constantly overwhelmed by their environment, it is excruciatingly difficult to parent and see results swiftly, because highly sensitive kids struggle with generalizing skills, especially when they're overwhelmed. So when you don't have a systematic capacity to break out of this pattern, you end up raising a highly sensitive child who responds in the same way. Everything is a fire and I need to put it out. And the brain responds to that by highlighting fires and being more attuned to fires. So what do I mean by that? I mean that for you as a parent, when your child is not brushing their teeth and they're not able to respond to yes or no without freaking out, and you're zeroing in and you have tunnel vision on that problem as well, and you start to harp on them to make sure that they do it regularly because you're tired and you're fried and you haven't been able to figure out how to do this effectively, then your child starts to build the skill that big major problems require big major reactions. And so it actually perpetuates the problem of the meltdown cycle. Whether or not they melt down about teeth brushing for the rest of their lives is neither here nor there. The pattern of continuously seeing meltdowns and continuously feeling like they have to inhibit the meltdowns in order to please other people builds a skill of external motivation. And so we think about supporting your highly sensitive child to be internally motivated. That is much more along their nature. Highly sensitive people are more intuitively aware of what other people think and what other people feel and what other people experience. And so naturally, they want to respond to society in a helpful way. Unfortunately, when we parent with force, or we parent with traditional parenting strategies, or we parent from principle of you are going to be cooperative instead of you're trying and supporting your child one at a time with one issue at a time, children end up noticing and getting stuck in seeing that their problem at hand is the biggest problem that they have to deal with. So how does this play out in older childhood, and how does this play out in adolescence? So highly sensitive kids who maybe grow out of the meltdown cycle end up developing perfectionism and end up developing a challenge of not being able to advocate for their needs because the problem in that moment becomes so insurmountable that they never develop the skills to regulate their emotions and to do it in a way that is consistent across problems. And it's really important to make sure that you're teaching your child how to manage their emotions across problems rather than teaching your child to manage their emotion with the effect of just getting them to follow through on a task that you've been asking them to do regularly. So the next thing that we see is in terms of parents of highly sensitive teens is that there's perfectionism, as we mentioned for older children. This plays out into adolescence, or in a deeper level, there's risk taking. And so highly sensitive kids can end up in a challenge of feeling like they need to seek thrill because that's how they feel most alive. So that thrill might be in promiscuity, might be in drug use, might be in not feeling like they can calm their own body and needing to look for outside ways to calm their own body. So that might be through hurting themselves or feeling like escaping their life would be the best option. Now, I'm saying these things from my clinical perspective just because that's our expertise at the companies and the practices that I run. But it's also important to understand that the research speaks to that. Highly sensitive children who don't know how to regulate their own emotions in their body and only focus on solving problems at hand don't respond through their intuition. And as a result, they don't feel calm, capable, or compassionate because they're not able to be self-compassionate. And so when you're parenting a sensitive child and you're stuck in teaching them those skills, and then you have a highly sensitive or a non-highly sensitive sibling that you need to also parent, then it can be quite tricky because the support in making sure that all of the children are learning the skills at the same time is really requires quite a strategy. So when we think about being able to pattern out of this, and parent out of this, the pattern of parenting through principle requires you to shift out of the meltdown cycle from a different perspective. It's not, you won't be able to do that if you're just looking at the meltdowns themselves and what your child might be upset about in that moment. You need to look at it from a bigger picture view. And the bigger picture view is parenting playfully and reducing shame, as well as identifying, looks like I had a little tech glitch. I think we're ready. I think we're still on. So I was saying that parenting through strategy requires you to focus on playful parenting, communicating with your child there to help them get their needs met in a way that doesn't shame them, that decreases their ability to take in shame. So, even if you are not engaging in shaming parenting, like, you better do better this time, or don't you see that other people, that your actions impact other people, those types of comments and frustrating comments that you might be having with your child when you're strapped, usually. But other times, if you're using traditional parenting strategies and that's how you were parented and that's what feels natural to you, then it's really important to train yourself out of that because it's not effective. And then doing that in a way that helps your child, not just by reducing the intensity of how you respond to them, but also in helping them not go to an automatic place of feeling like they're a bad kid. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of strategy regarding giving them feedback in a continuous improvement loop, and noticing that they are focused on shifting out of that big emotion in a way that's safe and communicative. And highly sensitive kids have that intuition, but they don't trust it when they're stuck and they're stuck in fear. And so it's the same dynamic that you're dealing with as a parent when you're stuck, right? So it's super crucial to get support for you when you're working on changing your child's behavior. Because if you're focusing on just changing your child's behavior and figuring out how you can teach your child something different, then your mindset is not going to be in from a place of feeling like your child is capable. It will be focused on teaching your child because they're broken. Now, obviously, we know highly sensitive kids are not broken. They are so necessary in the world and super important to how we all learn about our own behavior and how we all learn how to be creative and playful and communicative in safe and healthy ways. And if your child is not able to do that, then it's important that you lead the way. Okay. So if you're stuck in noticing how to do this for your child, or you're ready to follow a proven system with an expert mentor, then we're here to support you in figuring out whether or not we'd be a good fit. This is something that we help our clients do in a systematic way so that it's step by step by step, and you don't feel like you're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. So I would encourage you to go ahead and book a call and take a moment to hear what it was like. I'll speak about that at the end. For me, being parented as a sibling of a highly sensitive child. So again, for parents who are ready to break through this pattern, you go ahead and head over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk if you and your teen are ready for support. We'll help you design and decide if we're the right fit for your goals. So, and one of the things that we'll speak about, and this is going to be a 2-part series, so the next video that I do live will be related to this, is a deeper dive on the frustration that I experience in being parented alongside a highly sensitive child. Because when my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so for a fair amount of my early childhood, and then also worked, and a lot of my memories being parented was particularly related to my relationship with my mom, though my dad was focused on teaching us as a parent as well. I have a fantastic relationship with my parents, and it's also true that they really struggled in parenting my sister. So knowing what I know now, one of the things that I'm able to, over the years I've been able to come to terms with, is realizing how stuck they were and how that impacted my ability to get my needs met as a child. So one thing that I learned when my parents were just consumed by my sister's big emotions is that I needed to take care of myself and I needed to figure it out on my own. Now, this isn't just being the oldest child, and the needs that an oldest child is typically taught. This goes beyond what we see for a typical older child dynamic. The lessons I needed to learn because my parents were focused on parenting my sister is that I needed to take care of myself, and I needed to be independent, and I needed to be in charge, and I needed to perform. Now, this led to a lot of lessons that I needed to work hard in order to feel valued. Now, it certainly wasn't my parents' intention. They were very proud of me and my accomplishments, and they made that known very effectively. And it's also true that when I experienced any negative emotion, my parents used traditional parenting strategy, and so I learned that that was not appropriate. It was just not appropriate to be mad, frustrated, stuck, or overwhelmed because I wasn't heard in that. And so traditional parenting strategies will teach you to shame your kid, will teach you to tell your kid that that their emotions aren't okay, and it will teach you to assume that your child is in charge of you, and that will lead you to want to over control your child. And so as a result, what I learned is that I can only get my needs met if I'm doing what my parents want me to do. And if I make mistakes, we shouldn't really talk about them. We should just pretend that they didn't happen, or we should just, talk about it in a sense of getting a lecture, or, my parents would share their disappointment, and then we would move on. We would just assume that I had the skill to do better. But sometimes I didn't have the skill to do better. I was just expected to know how to do better. And again, I can't speak more about the fact that this type of knowledge in terms of parenting effectively for highly sensitive kids and reducing parent shaming of children just wasn't available in the 80s and early 90s, right? And now it is. So for you as a parent, it's super important to take that on, because for your sensitive child and for your other children who may or may not be sensitive, they need to learn that their emotions are valid. They need to learn that their emotions are okay, and they need to learn that it's okay to experience a negative emotion and to learn how to follow through on your expectations. Because the assumption that traditional parenting places on children is ineffective for their development, and that leads to people-pleasing workaholism at best for all of adults in this kind of dynamic for traditional parenting, but pretty risky behavior at worst, because if you don't know how to manage your emotions, you're going to learn how to escape them in some other way. So I had to deal with a lot of patterns that I had developed in my adolescence and in my young adulthood to escape my emotions that weren't healthy to keep going. And that was very difficult. And one of the patterns that I ended up developing was in taking on the caretaking role. So I'm going to speak about that in my next video because it warrants a much longer conversation. But one of the things that I speak with about our clients is the want and the need to raise children who want to give back to the community, who want to serve other people, who want to feel fulfilled in their career, who want to feel fulfilled in their family, but not because they feel obligated and because they only get a sense of self-worth if they are helping other people. You want your children to feel like they are worthy of care, concern, and desires and wants of their own, regardless of whether or not they have relationships that tell them the same thing. Because when you're parenting a sensitive child, or you're parenting a sibling of a sensitive child, it's really, really crucial to teach them that they can have whatever they want, not just if they work hard for it, but also because they can they can build the skill to ask for it and to get it in a different way, and to compromise and to be flexible in that as well. Because when I say whatever they want, I mean career goals, relationship goals, adult family relationship goals, all of that. Like they're allowing your children to understand that they can design their life and how they want it, and be able to do that in a way that feels empowering and that they feel capable in doing that is a skill that you want your kids to learn, obviously, right? That's why you're here. So I'm going to spend quite some time discussing that in our second part of this series. So thank you for your time. I wish you the best in parenting your sensitive child. And if you're ready to break out of this cycle and you're done throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, go ahead and book that breakthrough call. We'll discuss whether or not we are the ones to help you get there. And if we're not, we'll point you in the right direction for sure. So meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk if you are parenting a teen and your teen is ready for support as well alongside you. Okay. All right. Bye.